Good morning, all. Thank you very much for allowing me to come up here and speak with you today. And a lot of people know a little bit about my background or are introduced to me through other people, know about my military service. And most people make the assumption that my story and my experiences with trauma and conflict stem from the military. But there's far more to my life than that. And with that, I want to start from the beginning. And in the beginning, I was born the youngest of 6 boys in Owasso, Michigan. And as a young man, I grew up in a very troubled household. My birth father was a very violent man, an alcoholic. And as an example of this, before my second birthday, my mother had bought me and the 2 youngest brothers a tricycle to share for Christmas present. And when my father found out about that, he ended up putting her and the 3 youngest of us in the hospital. And that's when my mother decided it was a good time to leave. And at that time, the state of Michigan decided it wasn't good for her to take all 6 children. So she was only able to take the 3 youngest. So we moved from Michigan to West Palm Beach, Florida, where my mother's sister and brother lived. While in West Palm Beach, I was kind of new to it, and that's where my first memory started. And my mother had met a new man, and she ended up getting married. And he was the only man I've known as my father my entire life. But from West Palm Beach, he decided he was going to open a pipe fitting business in Youngstown, Ohio. So we moved from West Palm Beach to Youngstown. And he had a very successful business. But at this time, we started to realize I didn't know the difference in this because this was my life at this far. He was a very violent man as well. He was very abusive to us, but I will give him the credit because he did go to court and he did end up getting custody of my 3 older brothers. So about 8 years old is when I first really met my oldest brothers. So it was kind of interesting for me trying to learn these 3 new people that are my brothers, but I'd never met them before. We all became very close almost immediately, though. We used to do things, we'd go out and play guns. In Youngstown, Ohio, my brothers were the paper boys, and we used to rake leaves and do everything we could to raise money. But in our neighborhood, there were a lot of children from stemming in all ages, but everybody was really close. So we'd go out at nighttime and we'd play guns and kick the can and flashlight tag. But our father told us, one of his biggest rules would never throw rocks. Don't ever throw rocks. That's bad. Don't ever throw rocks. Well, playing guns, we're out there with 30 kids on each side playing guns. You had to use something for grenades, so what did we use? We used rocks. One time we're all out in the woods, and there was a creek that ran out in the woods, and this small hill, and then me and a couple of my brothers in this other creek. And my oldest brother, Richard, picked up a rock and goes, "Grenade!" and throws it over the hill, and you're thump. And we're like, oh my gosh. So we all went over the hill, and my other brother, Ben, blood gushing down his head, and all we were thinking is, oh my God, we're in so much trouble. Not that my brother's bleeding, he's bleeding so bad. So my other brothers are getting around him saying, wash it off in the creek, Ben. So he's on his hands and knees in this dirty creek water, spraying water on his head because we didn't want to get in trouble for throwing rocks. So needless to say, we all went home. His head did not heal from the water in the creek. And he went to the hospital to get his treatment, and the rest of us, all 5, sat in a line outside my father's room as he used a paddle on us. And he would go full instinct. You'd take your pants off, and he would go full-on paddle. Ironically, the person that made this paddle for my brother was my brother Ben, who had just got hit in the head with a rock. So imagine irony at its best. So with growing up in that household and the violence and the trouble that we had, my oldest brother enlisted in the military. He went in the United States Army. And his first paycheck in the military, he actually bought a mini bike, a moped, motorcycle for us. And when he brought it home to us, my father, John, well, he got really angry at that. He's like, "What, are you trying to say that I can't raise and buy gifts for my own children?" So he just bought this new mini bike and built it in the garage. And when John found out about it, he took a sledgehammer to it and smashed it all to pieces. So that was the kind of household we grew up in. And shortly after that, each couple years, my brothers all enlisted in the United States Army because they didn't know how to get away from the household. My brother Tom, he's the second oldest, he was actually going to get a scholarship to Youngstown University for playing the tuba. And while he was getting ready for the final practice at Youngstown University, he had his band uniform on. And remember in the 70s, you had those old window latches that you lock the window like that? Well, he was in his band uniform and he couldn't get his window to lock, so he was hitting it, and it snapped off and sliced his wrist. Almost killed him, but he took that as a bad omen and never put on a band uniform again. And he enlisted in the United States Army. Then shortly after that, the next year, my brother Ben enlisted in the Army, and then my father got a job. He dropped out of school in the 4th grade, and we were told that he was in the mafia. We were trying to figure out how he was getting these positions, and we soon found out that he probably was in the mafia because he had a 4th grade education as a mediocre small business owner, a pipe fitter. He got a position at Rockwell International, where he was a nuclear technician, where he built glass tubing for the space shuttle system. And that's when the space shuttles first started coming out. So we were like 4th grade education, huh? But he got that job, so we all moved to Washington. My 2 younger brothers, David and Hank, David ran away from home pretty much soon after we moved to Washington. I was 10 years old. He ran away from home before he was 14. Just because of the violence, and my father actually hated him quite a bit. He wore glasses. He was the only one of us that wore glasses at the time. He used to call him 4 Eyes and everything, but he ran away from home. And after that, he joined the Army. My brother Hank, a couple years later, experienced the same trauma at home, and he ended up running away from home before his 14th birthday as well. When I was home alone, I took the brunt of the abuse that we'd been raised in, and we were trying to figure out what we're going to do with our lives. And because of my household life was so hard, I was never home. I skipped school a lot. I used to skateboard, and that was my show. Skateboarding was my release. That's what I did for a living. I was pretty good at it. I wasn't phenomenal like some people, but this was my life, and this is what got me away from home. And I did a lot of skateboard competitions, and it was my peace. But I knew that if I left home, the only person who was going to be left was my mother, and she was going to get the abuse. So I didn't have a choice because I barely graduated high school. I don't know how I graduated high school, but I somehow managed. I didn't want to work at McDonald's for the rest of my life, and I didn't want to work at the grocery store for the rest of my life, so I ended up enlisting in the United States Marine Corps. And that's the first part of my story, and I have much more to share, and I'm going to do that over the next 2 visits, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And